Okay, so for 30 years, when Charles Schulz was doing these strips, it was still going pretty strong in the 80s. I mean, he even had a Saturday morning cartoon, for crying out loud, back when they were having those things. I might as well mention this as we go into the 90s era of Charles Schulz, but there was one in the late 80s that aired that a lot of people say was one of the worst specials. It's called, like, She's the Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown. And this one was a combination of live action and animation. And it starred not Snoopy, but his brother Spike. And it also starred Sparky's daughter, Jill. And it shows Spike befriending this girl. And yeah, nothing really happened there. And this was released like right after Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so it was kind of a shame that they kind of went that direction, as it looks pretty inferior. Okay, there was one special that I can't believe I missed. It was called Why Charlie Brown Why? Now this happened in 1990 or something, and I was in college then. But this is where Charlie Brown and Linus meet a girl who has cancer. Yeah, they went there. They really went there. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, I kind of lost interest in Charlie Brown and Snoopy and the gang when I was a teenager in the 80s, and hate to say it, I mean, did I really grow out of it? Out of all the things that I could have grown out of, that is what I grew out of? It's weird to me. The issue is kind of following what was happening in that comic strip at the time. Because I really only had, I think the paper that we got didn't run Peanuts because we had I don't remember. I think we had the PI, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, but it was the Seattle Times that actually ran it. And yeah, so if I wanted to read Peanuts, I'd have to read it like in school or something like that, where the newspaper was actually carried there. It's crazy. And I have to say, back in the time before there was internet, trying to follow something that has a long-running story was incredibly difficult because you really had to go by what bits and pieces you can find. So even when I was a kid, going into Peanuts was like watching a soap opera that's been on for many, many years. But in the world of Peanuts, pretty much stayed the same for the most part. So yeah, and plus the library that I went to didn't really have a lot of Charlie Brown books anymore. I think they were just they just weren't really doing that. I do remember noticing in about 1988 or so, this is when the Peanuts strip went to a 3-panel format. Whereas before, Peanuts was pretty famous for having 4 panels, and even in the Peanuts treasury books that I would read, they would orient them in a certain way every time. So it was weird to see that 3-panel format. But you know who else had a 3-panel format back then? Garfield. When Garfield, I think, entered in the 80s, I think a lot of the spotlight turned from Charlie Brown to Garfield. And I think that was a big mistake. Because Garfield was really only funny in the early 80s. Peanuts had decades to be funny that Nick succeeded at. I'm just going to say that. If you're going to put like a thing like Charlie Brown, Garfield, there's an inequality here that I'm going to put there. Duh. So when I started looking at the Peanuts comic strip of the 90s, I noticed that there were certain lines that Sparky drew that had this kind of shakiness to them, for lack of a better term. I think he had kind of issues with drawing. I mean, he must have gotten really good at... he must have gotten really good and fast at drawing them over the years of doing it. But, yeah, so you can kind of see a progression in his works there. Yeah. I was kind of hoping if I was going to do this thing, I was going to do it right and read every strip that Charles Schulz ever did of Peanuts. The issue is there are 18,000 of them, about that much. And there were things I discovered that I didn't even really know about. Like, I think Charlie Brown had a girlfriend named Peggy Jean. I think he met her at camp. Then I think, like, just before the strip ended, Peggy Jean it was discovered she had a boyfriend. So, Yeah, Charlie Brown gets the short end of the stick once again. Never did get the girl. I'm told that the only way that you can kind of, if you want all of the Charles Schulz work in Peanuts, I think you can buy a whole set of them from Fantagraphics Books. Yeah, I think that's kind of as far as like the printed way you can do it. For me, I kept finding, if I wanted to, I could go on the internet, I could click, and read every one, but I just kind of didn't do that. So, yeah. I made a discovery, I remember reading this article in Sports Illustrated saying that Charlie Brown hit a home run, and I had to confirm whether that was true. And I found out in 1993, he did hit a home run, apparently. And apparently the pitcher was the great-granddaughter of Roy Hobbs. This was so weird because I kept expecting something after this. And I don't even think they show the scene of Charlie Brown hitting the home run. I think he's about to go up to bat, and then in the next strip, the next day, he's doing somersaults on his way home, saying he got a home run. And I kept expecting the home run to be somehow redacted because I know Charlie Brown. That always happens to him. I don't really think they ever did that. So was Charles Schulz throwing a few bones to Charlie Brown in his last days? Who knows? Yeah, I hate to say I had to do a particular rush of this episode because for what I'm doing in the next few months, I've got a book deal. Actually, it's a 2-book deal, and I'm going to be doing a lot of videos that aren't related to the Geek Church at all. I don't know how much time I'm going to have to do my show, but I want to. By show, I mean the Geek Church, the show, and my product reviews. So yeah, hopefully you'll be seeing that. The reason why I bring this up is because I think it's pretty obvious that I've got dreams, and having these book deals are something that might help my dreams kind of come to reality. And I don't know if I'll ever have the way that Charles Schulz was able to achieve his dream of doing this strip that he really loved doing and continue to do it is really awesome. I mean, it really is. And the best part I think about it is I don't think he ever really let the fame go to his head. I mean, he didn't go and the Peanuts strip, I'm told, made billions. And he was made millions, but he never really looked at the money, honestly. He said that in videos, and it was pretty clear for his lifestyle that he didn't really care about the money. You didn't see him buy a big mansion in Beverly Hills and own a lot of stuff like you see a lot of these big time stars do, and just he was content with a 9-to-5 workday. And it's sad that he was sad. Okay, it was. And I still think he's a great man, even with knowing that he had an affair. It doesn't make him terrible, it just makes him human. I mentioned before of the stuff that I've had to grow up with, being on the autism spectrum, but not knowing I was on it, not ever being diagnosed till I was 50 years old, having to deal with a lot of demons in my time. And Charlie Brown taught me that was okay. It's okay to fail. It is okay to fail. It's also okay to love and not have it be returned. Yeah, this is a common theme in the strip. I mean, Charlie Brown loves a little redhead girl. She does not love him back. I mean, Lucy loves Schroeder. Sally loves Linus. Pretty sure Peppermint Patty and Marcy both like Charlie Brown, but none of this ever gets returned to these characters. We do it all the time, and we've done it to others. That's just life. But I think the greatest thing that Charlie Brown taught me is that whatever you do, don't give up. I think if I have to nail down the theme of the entirety of the strip, this giant mega saga, it's just that that's what would be the theme. I think about the bad times of my life and all the stuff that I've gone through. But in the end, the world didn't come to an end. You move on, even though it's difficult. And then eventually, stuff doesn't feel so bad. and you start getting going once again. And yeah, I wonder about the whole football thing, which is, of course, the primary thing that Charlie Brown is known for. But is he a fool for always trying to kick the football, even though Lucy's just going to yank it away? Well, yeah, but Lucy shouldn't yank away that football, little sociopath. And you should probably not listen to her anymore. I think Charlie Brown tries to kick the football because one day Lucy isn't going to pull it away. Maybe he's the hero because he's willing to trust even though his trust is misplaced. What's funny is the last time that football is seen in the strip, Lucy is called away by her mother, so Rerun holds the ball for Charlie Brown to kick. And then later on, when Lucy asks Rerun, did Charlie Brown kick the football? Rerun just tosses that ball in the air and just says, we'll never know. Yeah, I'm told after Charles Schulz stopped doing the strip, he suddenly realized that kid's never going to kick that football. And I don't think it's mean of the author to not allow him to do that. It's unrealistic to think that we're always going to get what we want, or that we're going to get something that we do want. Sometimes we don't get what we want, and when our desires are not granted, this is where we find out who we really are. And sometimes, in losing, we discover that the thing we really wanted isn't really the thing that really mattered. I don't know, think about the Great Pumpkin. Linus is so devoted to this concept of it, and he just believes that it'll happen. It just won't. He never gets the toys that he thinks the Great Pumpkin will grant, and he even lures Sally involved in this. And is this a comment about believing in God and the futility of faith? I don't think so. I think Schulz was very devout in his life. But it is about how just sometimes the things that we want, we believe in, just don't happen. But it's okay to pursue your dreams, even if they don't come true. I think that's a good lesson to learn. Sparky retired 2000, and one day before his last strip was officially published, he passed away. I remember this pretty well because the news media was covering his retirement in excess, and then he died, and then they had to cover that, and then you can see articles that were done before they learned he died versus, you had that sort of contrast. I remember reading For Better For Worse on Valentine's Day, 2000, which was a thank you to Charles Schulz, and I could tell it was sort of a send-off for his retirement. And she probably published this, she probably had done this comic strip, who knows, some point in time before she knew that Charles Schulz had passed away. And the newspapers still ran that strip. To me, I remember reading that strip and just going, too soon, man, too soon. Sparky's last strip, which appeared in February 13th, 2000, was nothing more than a letter just explaining why he was retiring. I remember, I think people asked what he was going to do after retirement, and I think he said he was going to work on screenplays. I wonder if the Peanuts movie, the 2015 film, was something he was working on. I'm told the family was kind of made a deal with Blue Sky Studios back then. And if you've seen the film, it's a lot of it is just kind of repurposing of Charles Schulz's old strips and giving the Peanuts characters a CG makeover. And the plot is kind of weak. It's kind of a cut and paste of a lot of the stuff that Charles Schulz had already said. There's a plot where Charlie Brown is mistaken for, some honor student, and turns out it was Pepper and Patty. I don't really remember that in the strip, but that could have happened in the 90s, who knows. It kind of feels like a bad sitcom, really. However, there's a moment at the end of the 2015 film I really appreciate where Charlie Brown is being hoisted aloft by his friends, and then suddenly the CG fades to kind of a still shot of what it looked like where Charles Schulz would have written it, and then there's even a signature of Schulz on the side, and I couldn't help but just really melt down when I saw that part. I just felt it's just a legacy right there. Now, it's been said by Schulz that Charlie Brown can't be happy because being happy isn't funny, but Peanuts was funny, and in many cases, very funny. So, to hear Linus say, at the end of the Peanuts movie say a line of like, "It must be great to be Charlie Brown right now." It's satisfying. But it's a happy ending that Peanuts as a whole doesn't really need. I've heard that Sparky's favorite film was Citizen Kane, which was repeated several times in the strip, mentioned a few times. If you haven't seen it, it opens up with Orson Welles' character Charles Foster Kane, who is on his deathbed and utters the word Rosebud. We all know this part. And most of the film is just interviews with Charles Foster Kane's friends. And no one knows what Rosebud means. In the end, we find out it was referring to a sled. And if you watch Citizen Kane, you can see early in the film that Charles Foster Kane, as a kid, was only happy in his childhood, playing on his own with his sled. And maybe this is how Sparky viewed his own childhood, as a place where things were happy and you were happy. Maybe that's why he spent half a century writing about childhood. Who knows? Citizen Kane is a sad story about how our life's work can be disposed of so easily, and I can't help feel that Schultz's work shouldn't be that way. It needs to last longer than at least his kid's life. That's for sure. I remember watching an episode of The Office where Andy Dwyer gives Aaron, the secretary, they were kind of a thing at that time on the show, a card with Snoopy and Woodstock on them. And Aaron doesn't recognize the characters of Snoopy and Woodstock. Now, I realize Aaron is not portrayed as being too intelligent, and probably wasn't raised by these characters like I was. But really, you don't know who Snoopy and Woodstock are? Then again, I remember this one time back when I was writing skits for college age groups, I did a skit that was kind of based on Charlie Brown. And in one scene, Charlie Brown is sharing his feelings with Lucy, and they do that thing with the psychiatry booth. The problem is I had a team that kind of looked over the script and edited the scene because they mixed up Lucy and Sally, those two characters. And to me, I went like, what the heck? How do you mix up Lucy and Sally? That's like mixing up Star Wars and Star Trek, or saying that you made a home run in football. In other words, I just couldn't understand how anyone couldn't recognize these Peanuts characters. And I don't want to see them get lost, like the end of Citizen Kane, where whatever good that Charles Foster Kane did just kind of got buried, really, with him. And Sparky himself was named after Sparkplug, a comic character that I've never even heard of. I did an episode about how we as a society are being hit with just sequels that may or may not be needed, which makes it difficult to find a genuinely good new medium, really. If there's a franchise that I want to continue as long as it can, it's the legacy that Charles Schulz had. I mentioned earlier that I grew up with Peanuts. I did. And I think every generation should. There's something just universal about this. I don't know if it's just for American kids, but it just feels that I'm told that strip is printed throughout the world. So hopefully everyone can relate with it, because everyone can relate with being a child. And it's one thing that I want to never end. Anyway, I'm glad I got to do this tribute to Sparky Schulz. And hey, as I mentioned before, I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to get a next episode out. But I have a plan for March about doing something about Franchise Court, to talk about certain franchises that have just gone on way too long, or when you should really quit. Even though I just talked about a man whose work I hope never quits. But hey. Anyway, keep watching my product reviews, and I'll try and give you as much updates as I can about my book deal when I can. But for now, this is Mark from the Geek Church. I'm signing off.